Okay, hello everybody. If you don't know me, I'm ToeGrinder. I make the Mage Hub website, I'm a Mage guide writer, and I'm the GM of the guild Mist on Tyrannical EU, where I raid at a Hall of Fame level and push Mythic Plus rank 1 title every season. This is gonna be my Frost guide. I'm gonna be doing something slightly different for this set of guides, and then I'm gonna be focusing more on the rotation aspect and less on the other things that are more likely to change. And I'm gonna be just going through the Mage Hub guide at the same time. So let's just get stuck into it. Starting off with the talent build that I recommend for raiding. There's not a huge amount of choice, I think. I would say that this is mostly locked in. If you're on any fight where you're casting Blizzard, you can spec into Ice Collar or Freezing Rain, but what you drop is going to depend on the fight. Generally, I would recommend dropping the Ray talents first, as they're probably the worst on AOE, but at the same time, if you're just cleaving as Frost, I recommend just staying with the standard raid build because your cleave with splitting ice, even if you never cast Blizzard, is extremely good. On the class tree side, the only thing I would recommend is specking out of Ice Cold if you ever need Ice Block. One situation this tier where I recommend that is on Echo of Neltharion, because in the last phase you can Ice Block instead of getting into one of the portals, which frees up another portal towards the end of the fight when things are a little bit hectic and people might not know where all of their assignments are. Other than that, this is pretty standard. Whenever it comes to dungeons, I recommend this for Fortified. The class tree has a lot of the active utility like Spellsteal, Unremove Curse, Ring of Frost, Dragon's Breath. If you find you don't need these, you can spec into other talents. The main one I would recommend is Winter's Protection. So you can take out like Ring of Frost and either one of these two, depending on which dungeon you're in, and go into Winter's Protection. In the spec tree, you can see we've dropped the Ray talents, we've picked up the 2 Blizzard talents in Freezing Rain and Ice Collar, and this talent, Splintering Cold, has been moved over to Sub-Zero, and Wintertide has been moved to Snowstorm. This is what I recommend for Fortified. There's a couple of changes that you can make for Tyrannical, essentially move this talent to here, and move this talent to here. It just gives you a little bit more single target, although both builds I think are fine on both weeks. It's really just depends on your grip. So getting onto the rotation, the core mechanic of Frost is Shatter. So Shatter gives you 50% multiplicative crit and 50% additive crit to any spell that hits a target that is considered frozen. There are 2 ways that you can freeze targets. So the main one is that you can apply Winter's Chill. This is a debuff that is applied by Flurry. And if you cast a spell into Winter's Chill, that spell will act as frozen and remove a stack. Winter's Chill has 2 stacks. The other way of applying Winter's Chill is whenever you have Coldest Snap and Cone of Cold hits 3 or more targets, it will apply Winter's Chill to all of the targets hit. The other way that things can be act as frozen is through the debuff Fingers of Frost, or the buff Fingers of Frost. This is a buff to Ice Lance that simply makes your next Ice Lance act as if the target were frozen. Simple enough. One benefit to this is because it is a buff on you and not a debuff on the target, if your Ice Lance cleaves, it will act frozen on both targets. The third simple way to make a target act as frozen is freeze it. The main ways you have this are Frost Nova, you have Ice Nova, and you also have the freeze ability from your pet. So a quick overview of those procs and how they interact. Most of your rotation is going to be based around spending these procs and spending them efficiently. So because a target is either frozen or not frozen, there is very minimal benefit to casting Fingers of Frost into Winter's Chill. You do have the Wintertide talent, which gives you a small damage buff when you combo those 2 things up, but it's not big enough that you actively want to combo them up. You would do more damage if you separated the 2 procs. So this means that if you have a Brain Freeze or a Flurry proc, rather than spend it immediately, you want to get rid of your Fingers of Frost procs and then spend your Flurry proc. Sometimes you'll find you'll be in a situation where you have both procs, you have a Flurry available and you have Fingers of Frost, and if you're in that situation and you're already casting a Frostbolt, then you just want to spend the Flurry because you don't want to risk getting a Brain Freeze and it overriding the old one, because Brain Freeze is a much more powerful proc than Fingers of Frost is. While you consume the majority of your Winter's Chills with Ice Lance, you have a couple of hard-hitting spells, mainly Glacial Spike Ray of Frost, and Comet Storm that you want to get into the Winter's Chill debuff where possible. So the Frost Mage rotation at a very high level is fairly simple. So you cast Frostbolt as your filler spell, you spend procs, that's flurries, ice lances, and you use your cooldown spells such as Comet Storm, Glacial Spike, and Ray of Frost in between. Note that your AoE spells like Comet Storm and Frozen Orb and Blizzard, they all benefit from Winter's Chill, but they do not remove charges. And then outside Icy Veins, a lot of your Winter's Chill optimization and Flurry optimization is going to come around Glacial Spike. So Glacial Spike is castable at 5 Icicles. You can see my Icicles here in the middle of the screen under my weak auras. So Frostbolt, Flurry, and Ice Lance all give Icicles. And then at 5 Icicles, you can cast Glacial Spike. Simple enough. So we always want to cast Glacial Spike into Winter's Chill whenever we are outside Icy Veins. So I'm going to show a couple of examples, but the main thing to understand is it doesn't matter if Flurry was cast before or after Glacial Spike, or if you're going into the first or second charge of Winter's Chill. The main thing to optimize is always cast Glacial Spike into Winter's Chill in a way that will waste as few Icicles as possible. So some examples of that would be if you had 5 Icicles, you could just cast Glacial Spike and Flurry afterwards, and the Glacial Spike will land inside the Winter's Chill. If you were at 4 Icicles and you had a Fingers of Frost, you could spend the Fingers of Frost, which will take you up to 5 Icicles, and then you could do your Glacial Spike Flurry. If you're at 4 Icicles without a Fingers of Frost, you could just cast the Flurry anyway, and then that'll take you up to 5 Icicles, and then it's got Winter's Chill, so you can then cast Glacial Spike. And if you were at 3 Icicles and you had no Fingers of Frost proc, well, then you could just go Frostbolt Flurry, which will take you to 5 Icicles. Suddenly now there's a Winter's Chill on the target, and then you can Glacial Spike afterwards. So there's a couple of different permutations. I recommend just practicing and just looking at your spells, looking at your Icicles, and just thinking, okay, you know, if I'm casting a Frostbolt and I'm going to cast a proc at the end, like how many Icicles am I going to be at after that? Because you always want to cast Glacial Spike into Winter's Chill at 5 Icicles and not waste procs. For example, if you were at 4 Icicles and you cast a Frostbolt and then Ice Lance at the end, then that Ice Lance would have wasted an Icicle. Right, so for the actual priority itself, you're going to want to cast Icy Veins as your highest priority. You always want to get that on cooldown. Then you cast Water Jet if you've spent a Flurry charge inside your Icy Veins. Cast Flurry after Frostbolt or Glacial Spike, or if you're at 4 Icicles like I explained before. You cast Comet Storm into your Winter's Chill, Ray of Frost into your Winter's Chill. Cast Frozen Orb on cooldown all the time. And then you want to cast Shifting Power when all of the above spells are already on cooldown. And then it's down to your bread and butter. Cast Glacial Spike into Winter's Chill, Ice Lance with Fingers of Frost, and then you fill with Frostbolt. Whenever you're casting Ray of Frost into Winter's Chill, you want to consume 1 stack already. That's because Ray of Frost doesn't consume stacks. It will just, the Winter's Chill will simply time out because of the time it takes Ray of Frost to deal its damage. So I will show you an example of that now. Whenever it comes to AoE rotation, you end up using a lot of the same spells that you would be using on single target. That's because a lot of your damage on AoE comes from Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm. So going over the AoE rotation, you want to be using Icy Veins on cooldown like you do on single target. The big change is that you want to be casting Cone of Cold, and with Coldest Snap, that means it'll be applying Winter's Chill, so we want to make sure that we're getting as much out of that Winter's Chill as possible, which means we always want to cast a Comet Storm before Cone of Cold. Then we're casting Orb and Blizzard on cooldown. We'll cast Comet Storm on close to cooldown. You can cast Cone of Cold to prevent your stacks of Snowstorm from overcapping. And then after that, you know, it's just shifting power once everything's on cooldown. And then we're filling with pretty low impact spells. We'll cast Glacial Spike if it's available, Flurry if it's available, Ice Lance if we've got procs. And then we can also use Ice Nova to shatter our AoE spells. And then if we really have nothing, we can cast Arcane Explosion and Frostbolt. So showing you an example if we were going into a pack on Mythic Plus, just showing that rotation. Start off by Icy Veins, get our 2 AoE spells out, Comet Storm, shatter the Comet Storm, get our AoE spells out again, and then on the second Comet Storm we can use our Pet Freeze to shatter the second one. And from this point onwards it's Frozen Orb and Blizzard on cooldown, and then we're just filling with our other random spells. It can be intimidating when you're getting flooded with procs that you want to prioritize those procs because, you know, get procs, spend procs, but it's really important that you're using your actual AoE spells on cooldown, so that's Blizzard, Comet Storm, and Frozen Orb. So whenever it comes to stats and gearing, because of the Shatter mechanic, a lot of people overrate the value of crit. You don't want your crit to go over 33% because that'll put your crit against shatter targets at 100%, but crit does not have inflated value before that. Even though you get multiplicative crit and that increases the value of crit, the additive crit you get from shatter will cancel that out and it makes crit like a normalized stat. So you want to be prioritizing mastery, then crit, then haste, and then verse. But as always, sim yourself, and a lot of times item level is going to be an upgrade. For trinkets, I recommend that you check out Mage Hub and the Sims page for the most up-to-date trinket information, but right now your best trinkets are mostly the passive trinkets, so Chromatic Essence is the best for everybody, and I've been using Vessel, but there are a lot of different options for Frost. You don't quite synergize as well with the active trinkets as some of the other specs, but they are still decent. Whenever it comes to crafting and embellishments, I recommend that you tend to craft weapon first because it is the highest impact slot. If you're going for embellishments, you're always going to want Shadow Flame. Unfortunately, it doesn't go on weapon, so you do need 3 crafts to reach the weapon plus 2 embellishments. And if you're doing a lot of Mythic Plus, I can recommend Undulating Spore Cloak instead of one of the Shadow Flame patches. Some people will recommend the Azure Weave set for Mythic Plus, but I prefer to recommend this because in the situations that you want to swap to Spore Cloak, you can drop one of your Shadow Flame patches, whereas if you do that with the Azure Weave set, you're essentially losing 2 embellishments in 1. Okay, that's me for today, guys. I know that this was probably a bit more trimmed down than a lot of the other guides I've done, and that's intentional. I kind of want to have guides where I just focus on the important shit and don't just talk absolute crap for 40 minutes to game the YouTube monetization algorithm. But yeah, if you like this guide, please like, comment, subscribe. I will be linking my stream in the description where I will be streaming a lot of M+ and raids. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.